Welcome everyone to Time to Thrive. Thanks for joining us today. Our guest is an attorney focused on helping entrepreneurs successfully form and operate their businesses. He represents his clients in contract or business disputes and advises them in matters such as contract negotiations, intellectual property, and regulatory compliance. Jay and his wife, Wendy, also own and manage a media production business where they are currently co-producing a documentary series on restoring mental health titled Unbroken Minds. They are also developing a nonprofit aimed at combating mental illness through workshops, education, coaching, and prayer. Welcome to the show, Jay. I'm excited to speak with you today.
Thank you, Bethany. I'm excited to be here with you.
I would love to know more about this nonprofit because that was when I was, reading through your bio and learning more about you, and the focus on law and all those things. But then there's this incredible, can I say, mission that you're on to combat something that is just so prevalent in society today. And
I
so
appreciate that.
Yeah. So tell us the story of how that got going and how you started with that. And
So, I mean, it's one of those things where my wife and we both quit our sort of corporate jobs, you could say. And then we were one day just talking about wanting to do a documentary together. And my wife said, I think God is calling us to do mental health. And for us, that was really out of the blue because we've been really big into gut health and things like that. But we started on this journey then to really dig into mental health. I have to say, like, this was like the best education I've ever had. We filmed over 150 interviews all over the country with experts and people with amazing testimonies. And it really just changed the way I look at the world and now the way I practice law. And so everything we'll be talking about, probably for the rest of the hour was just so much affected by this experience and really understanding what makes us and breaks us and what heals us, what makes us tick. And one of the biggest takeaways on that was just how important love is for us humans. Like, we were made to love and be loved. And when we don't get loved, I just learned now that really has caused so many people to have a lot of these mental illnesses, these mental health challenges. And then here's healing coming from love. It's just, boom, changed how the way I do everything.
well, the topic's been one that has had a lot of stigma attached to it. And so people aren't having those conversations. A lot of times we heal when we hear somebody else share an experience that is similar to our own. And then it makes us feel like, wow, I wasn't alone in that. Or there's somebody who understands what I'm, been going through. But when there's a stigma attached to something, we're less likely to hear people talking about those things that we're struggling with. And, it can kind of hold us back as a society if we're not being open about what's right in front of us.
Yeah, that's right, Bethany. And the sad thing about the stigma is it's the exact opposite of what we should be doing, because that is isolating somebody who really at that time needs community the most. And so, yeah, that's definitely a thing we want to do too, is just knock down those barriers. And yeah, it's just weird. We almost treat mental illness almost like it's a contagious disease and we got to keep away from this person or it might affect us. And I think a lot of it is just the ignorance. We don't know what to do, and we're afraid for our safety. There's just so much uncertainty. If we really understood that if we were there to just love that person, in most cases, that's going to be what that person needs. Just be there, being present, and showing them love. Not even giving them advice, just being present.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a broken world that we live in. And I would say that probably 100% of us are dealing with some form or fashion of, quote unquote, mental illness, and the fact that we've been broken by something or we've struggled with something or are struggling with something. And so it's, we should have that grace for those around us who, have it to maybe a greater degree than what we're struggling with.
Yeah. The World Health Organization says 1 in 4 people sometime in their lifetime will have a diagnosable form of mental illness. And most of us that will probably be subclinical at least sometimes. And so, yeah, it is really a universal thing. And it's not so mysterious when we understand, again, just our brain just breaks the same way very consistently. It's really fascinating. And so it could be any of us at any time. And so I've really learned to be a lot more sympathetic and understanding, appreciative of people in this situation. And really, when they come out of it, they have so much more emotional intelligence. And it comes out such a better person. And Wendy, my wife and I were like, man, we like hanging out with these people more than the normal people, because they're so much more real, authentic, and so it was a real blessing to make these connections. And really, yeah, we need to be talking about it more. And so now when I'm doing my legal work, I'm seeing myself more as like an architect of relationships, trying to show people how to have better relationships, how to better avoid disputes, and then if they have disputes, how to resolve them in a way that makes everybody feel good.
You know why I love that so much? Because I've been in a business owner for quite a long time, and my experience, unfortunately, in a lot of cases when there's an attorney involved, is that they're so focused on that billable hour, they're incentivized to stir the pot and keep everybody mad at each other so that they can continue to, be involved and bill the hours. It's very refreshing to speak to an attorney who right out of the gate is giving me a philosophy of peacemaker, of, trying to understand the situation. Because a lot of times in business, and I'm sure you can testify to that, it's really just a misunderstanding. And so
Yep.
this requires getting some clarification or getting some, just a dialogue going so that, you can better understand where the disconnect happened. And so a lot of times, I guess you end up being a mediator in those situations.
Yeah, it's tricky because I'm supposed to be an advocate when I'm hired, but I do feel like I could be the better advocate when I help the person try to understand the other side, see where they're coming from, and understand what they have to resolve it, and usually put it in the way that the other person might not have control of themselves. They might be overwhelmed by emotions, but if my client can get self-control, can be able to put themselves in the other person's situation, and extend the olive branch, that they now can really influence things, be the driver of restoring the relationship and avoiding a worse situation.
Right.
And I've been very blessed that a lot of my clients have been willing to experiment with this, in a sense, because it is contrary. I still call it experimenting. Because, yeah, the average lawyers will say you got to come in as hard and as fierce as possible. Right. But all that does, it's almost like laws of physics, right? For every action, there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction. So if you come in hard, the other person is going to get defensive and come back hitting hard. But if you come in soft, gently, loving, appreciative, the other person will naturally want to respond the same way, unless you're dealing with someone who has, a major personality disorder, and they're just totally out for themselves. And I have to say that the hardest situations to resolve for my clients is when they're like dealing with a sociopath or someone of that nature, where they are just, it doesn't matter what they say, it doesn't matter whether they're telling truth or not, they will just warp reality around themselves, and it could be very difficult for a client to.
Right. It's all about winning instead of resolution.
Yeah, and that's where you need, I tell everybody, you need really excellent contracts for those 5% of your relationships, right? Especially because everywhere is going to matter with them.
Right. Well, it's like prenups, right? You don't need a prenup until everything goes south. And so you're writing those contracts when everybody's, excited about beginning the relationship and moving forward. It's when they don't work out that the contracts come into play.
Especially though I see it can even be the foundation of a good relationship. So I look at contracts as expectation setting and make sure everybody's on the same page. And when everybody's clear and you understand, okay, when this happens, this is how we respond. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. That again could be the foundation of a very healthy relationship. especially if the terms are fair, balanced, and make sense. But I
Right.
do see a common mistake where someone thinks they're going to be a shrewd business person if they have the contract 100% in their favor,
Mhm.
and they're not making any promises, but the other person's promising the world. Like, what do you expect is going to happen out of this? Eventually, that person is going to feel like they're backed into a corner, and will have to, fight the way out. And that's when then they go talk to a lawyer, and the lawyer will find 100 ways to blow up that contract. Like, you can go so far and make your contract one-sided that you basically blow up your entire contract.
Yeah.
Most people don't understand that.
Yeah. I always say it's not a good deal unless it's a good deal for everyone. Then it's a
That's the best philosophy. It really is.
So what do you say, in this, post-COVID world that we're in, a lot of businesses are going to a lot more remote situations, maybe more using contract freelancers and things like that. So what should they be aware of in terms of when it comes, since we're talking about contracts? I know that's kind of a thing now with, like, if we have employees who are working remote, is there something that we should be paying attention to there?
Well, it definitely, the issues are going to be different depending on if someone is a worker as a employee, or if they are like a 1099 independent contractor.
Right.
And something I learned even from a friend who's an excellent employment attorney. She says a lot of employers don't know that if you have employees working from home, you're going to need to pay them a little bit of a stipend to cover their home office expenses.
Hmm.
And a lot of employers don't know that. And so, attorneys, when, you have an unhappy employee who then runs and talks to a lawyer, that lawyer can say, oh, have they paid you your home stipend? Have they done this for you, that for you? So it's,
okay.
yeah. So
I hadn't heard that. So that's interesting.
yeah. So that's one that I think a lot of employers need to watch out for. Look into your obligations to pay employees working from home. And when it comes to the independent contractors, there's just a host of issues there. The first one being, I think a lot of independent contractors are really misclassified employees. So they should be an employee. They should be paid W-2 wages. They should be getting overtime. They should be getting their disability workers' comp paid for. But
What's the criteria? What's the main thing you should be paying attention to there when it comes to contract workers?
oh, here's a sad thing. There's no one test. So
Okay.
even under federal law, depending on what law we're talking about, there's different tests. And then each state has their own tests. So California, and in fact, actually about 30 states have adopted what's called the ABC test, though. And they look at, first, what's the level of control that you're exercising over this person? Or is it like just too much control? Like you're telling them when they work, how they work, you're providing them the computer, you're doing this and that. They quickly can add up into, okay, yeah, this is an employee. The second prong that they might look at will be, is this person doing something that basically is filling a role that your business does? Or basically filling in for what you normally would have an employee do. So like if you are a marketing agency and you hire someone to run ads for you or run ads for you to help your clients, or making graphics for you that you turn around and hand to your clients, the government might say, okay, yeah, this person really is in the role of an employee for you.
Okay.
What would not be an employee would be, you're a marketing agency, and let's say you have a physical location, your toilet breaks, and you need a plumber to come fix it. The plumber would clearly not be an employee in that situation.
Okay.
Yeah, but these are radical extremes.
Yeah. So business owners have a great deal of risk. When you start a business, there's a certain amount of liability that you're assuming as a business owner. I know as an agency, even the fact that we do social media, my liability insurance was almost double because there was such a liability associated with the social media.
Mhm.
And so there, so is there any business that should not have liability insurance ever?
I mean, it's all a factor of, yeah. I mean, what is the nature of your business? Like, if someone's a video editor just chopping up videos for someone, I mean, what the risk of them messing up in a way and then being held liable is low. But yeah, if you're in a position of giving advice to people, you're at much more risk. Or if you're an event planner, if you host people, if you have a physical location where you have employees or customers come, like that's a huge risk.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I especially say, yeah, if you have a physical location, that's a clear red flag to look at getting insurance.
Right.
And like in California, for example, to form an LLC or a corporation, sorry, not to form it, but to keep it, every year you have to pay a minimum of $800. So I tell people, you might be better off just taking that $800 and investing it in insurance than just having an LLC or corporation. So it really can be some of your best bang for the buck early on.
So what are some other risks that business owners should know about?
So I've broken it down to 5 risks. The first one we were sort of talking about is contractual risk. So this is the risk that you might break a promise to somebody, an enforceable promise you made, or they might break in a promise to you. And
the
in
risk
fact,
of broken promises.
Yeah, the risk of broken promises. And the number one reason, or the most likely reason that a business would get sued is for contractual related issues. So you promise something and the customer doesn't feel like you delivered. Or you have a contract with an employee, an independent contractor, and again, there's a dispute rising out of it. So it's worth it to be very mindful of your contracts, understand what you're promising, making sure you're entering into a contract with the right person. That's critical. So the next one is tax risk. And of course, this is a big one. And a lot of early businesses might start off, make a lot of money real quick, and then all of a sudden get slammed with, huge tax penalties because they didn't know you're supposed to guess and estimate somehow how much money you're going to make, throughout the year and be paying estimated taxes. So it's
and taxes. That's not my favorite.
Yeah. Oh, it's so that's a big one. That's where there's a lot of risk there, and it's very important to make sure for everybody, right? It's a business that you have a good accountant or someone to help you keep track
there's
of.
a lot of reports and things that you're required to send into the state or send in federally,
That's right.
Monthly, quarterly, annually. So yeah.
Exactly. Even as a lawyer, I'm overwhelmed with these things. Related to this one then is regulatory risk. So this is the risk that you might break some law or regulation requiring you to do something. Most of the law actually could be summarized in this: don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill, don't discriminate. And if you follow all that, you're generally going to be safe. But again, we have crazy regulations, and some professions you might have to give affirmative disclosures on things, for example, or you might be required to have insurance, you might be required to get licensed. So it's good to always make sure you dig down and really understand the laws over your industry. The next one is IP risk. I call it intellectual property risk. This is the risk that someone might take advantage of or infringe on your intellectual property, your trademarks, your copyrights, your trade secrets, patents. The flip side is there's also a very high risk that you could be infringing someone else's stuff. And maybe we could talk about this more of, just so many people, for example, pick brand names or business names and they could be completely infringing on someone else's trademark.
Right. Yeah,
Or
we do need to talk about that one more, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. As a marketing agency, we're, obviously we're very careful about those things and making sure that, we're not stealing somebody else's intellectual property.
exactly. And this is something where a lot of people say, like, why is there such a price difference between Fiverr and, the professional agencies? And a lot of it does come down to the professional agencies do spend a lot more time making sure they're not infringing someone else. They're actually making original content,
Right.
original images, things like that. And then doing research so that you're going to be covered. And so that's why the Fortune 500s pay hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars just for a logo. But their risk of infringement could be hundreds of millions of dollars potentially. So they want to get it right. It's worth it for them to invest it. And I've heard horror stories where someone basically like went to one of those really a cheap service or found someone overseas, pay them pennies, and that person said, "Okay, here's something I made for you," but really they ripped it off from someone else, and the poor business had to pay an attorney a lot of money to go dig and find the original creator, pay off the creator, and then pay the attorney's fees, and they were out like a couple $1,000 just because they tried to only get a logo for like $100.
Right. Well, and a lot of that risk really just is, there's different levels of risk, like you said, multi-million-dollar companies and so on. So if you're international versus just in the US, for example, those are two different ball games there. And then if you are a single location and you only serve the 5-mile radius around your location, that's a different level of risk there.
Exactly.
So
and if you're online and you're trying to track people over,
right.
now very visible, very more risk.
Yeah. So with the number of people who are just like, in their basement office starting e-commerce sites and online businesses, a lot of them are just making their own logo and putting it out there, and there's no really regard for intellectual property. And we see this a lot in music, in the music industry, entertainment. There's only so many ways that you can configure a note into a song, right? And so what we're seeing a lot of lawsuits associated with, well, that's my
that's my chord. I own this chord.
Right. You stole that from my song and put it in your song. We're seeing that a lot more because there's there's only so much originality that we can do or make inside of a certain industry or whatever. There is a chance that you actually could design something that somebody else got something really similar to without ever seeing it. It's not plagiarism per se, but it's...
Yeah, you both could have been original creations, but
it's because of the type of industry it is. You naturally gravitate to a certain type of image or style or color. You end up with something that looks really similar. So you do have to be careful, even though you feel like, wow, I just made this. This is original to me. Just like in the music business, somebody else could have thought of something that looks very much like that. So it's important to be careful with it.
That's great advice. Yeah. And I work a lot with coaches, and, coaches are generally good at marketing. And so they want to use names that are very descriptive.
Right.
And as a result, there's already 100 coaches using basically the same name for their business, for the product. And these coaches will say, "Hey, I want to trademark my business," and they love their name. It means so much to them. And I have to tell them, sorry, there's like, you're like number 10 on the list where 10 people got there before you.
Right.
And you're not going to be able to register the name. And guess what? You're also at risk of any of these people turning around and suing you because you're using their name.
How much of a difference is there between trademarking like a logo mark and trademarking, say, like a brand of a product, like a product name brand? How much of a difference, or is the risk just as equal, or?
The word marks, the names are much more prevalent. So I would say there's probably a bit more saturation in the market when it comes to the word marks.
Right.
And with the word marks, it's not just how it looks, but it's also how it sounds. So you have to engage in a bit of, and it's also not just the sound also, but it's, for example.
That's interesting. You can't just change the way you spell it.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work. And for example, if your competitor uses the word home, but you want to use the word house, because those concepts are so close, the government, the USPTO might still say, these concepts are too similar and consumers are going to be confused. And that's the big thing, is that are consumers going to be confused? Right. But it's such a case by case analysis. For example, there's a case where there were manufacturers of medical gloves, and one has these, let's say bright green gloves, and then the other competitor comes out with these bluish green gloves. And the first one said, "Hey, you're taking our trade dress. This color for our gloves is iconic, and that's how people know it's us," and sued to stop the other one. But the court says, look, the shades are far enough apart that people can tell, and you're dealing with sophisticated medical workers. You'll probably spend time making sure, they're going to do the research on what gloves they want to use. So the risk of confusion there is low. So it all depends on your industry. So yeah, I think names could be very close. They could be very similar. They could be identical. Oh yeah, there's one where recently, let's say there's a car brand, and then there's someone who makes tires, and they both use the same product name. Cars, tires, pretty close, but they said, well, still, they're still far apart, and the one tires is for industrial workers. They're going to be fine. So this is where it's
different industries really make the difference too. So
yeah, different industries, different consumers, different product types. I mean, there's just a long list of factors, and this is where it's good to work with an attorney, because the attorney can help you assess whether it's going to be too close or not. And it's going to be a guess. Trademarks, I tell all my clients, are really an art form. It's a lot of it's a gut feel, and eventually over time you develop this feeling, okay, yeah, these two aren't going to work, and you might get better at guessing what the government will do. But even still, a lot of trademark attorneys complain that they'll file one trademark, that one will pass, and they'll file another trademark that's basically identical, and that one will get rejected.
So it's just we're human. Who's reviewing it, right?
Yeah, it's just who's reviewing it, and then you never know if the other trademark owners also would feel like it's too close, and then be very active and aggressive. So again, that's why it's good to work with an attorney. They can tell you, a good guess of what the government might do, and also help you identify who might be people out there who will potentially oppose your trademark and come up with arguments of why you should be able to go through with it. I see so many abandoned trademark applications where people try to do it themselves, and they get an initial rejection and then give up. And so they've wasted all that time, they wasted the money to file it, and I think working with an attorney could have made it a lot easier.
Right. All good points. So what was the fifth risk that we should be aware of as business owners?
So the fifth risk is kind of the one we were talking about, called general liability risk. Okay. And this is one that's usually covered by most insurance. This is the idea of, the slip and fall. Someone shows up, gets injured, wants to sue you because you're the property owner and you've got to be liable. So those are great to have. But also there's what's called E&O insurance, errors and omissions. Those are for people who give advice, recommendations. Even people who are making documentaries might go and get this type of insurance to back themselves up.
That's interesting. Do you do a lot of work in the entertainment industry?
I wouldn't say a lot, but dabble here and there at times.
Okay, sounds like you have some connections kind of built in there.
I definitely went to school out in the LA area, so I have a lot of
Ah.
friends doing it.
So like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon for you could be interesting.
That's right.
Well, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience in terms of from a legal perspective? What are, anything, any kind of parting words that you want to give in terms of what they should really be paying attention to, what they should avoid, anything like that?
So I think so. We talked about the 5 risks, but really at the end of the day, I think the answer is pretty simple for a lot of these things. And the most important thing you could do, and it comes back to what we opened up with, is love people. Because when you're treating people well, you're building great relationships with people, the last thing on their mind is to damage relationship by suing you. It really is your best legal defense.
Just be a nice person.
Exactly.
Be a good human.
It really works for all my clients I've seen. Like we could go the traditional legal route where you have that, a really one-sided contract, and a dispute comes up, and you make someone sign a release and this and this and that, but you're going to risk offending them. You're going to encourage them to go speak to a lawyer, and the lawyer's going to find who knows what.
Yeah.
But if you have that good relationship, they're happy, you're happy. And here's the thing in nature, what's really interesting. There's 2 types of sort of chemical reactions at the molecular level. There's fission reactions and fusion. So the fission is where we split the atom, and then there's the fusion reactions where we fuse. You know which one releases more energy?
I would assume the pulling apart.
I would think that too, but it's actually the fusion. More energy is released when 2 particles come together and form an atom. And so I truly believe too that if we look at relationships as an amazing opportunity for synergies and to create more than what would be possible when we're by ourselves, I think we can really just start approaching life differently and hopefully value more the relationships we have with people, appreciate them more, love them, be kind more, and when we understand how mental health works too, be more understanding and patient, and it will just come back to benefit us too.
But I mean, that just went full circle. We just from where we started and to where we are. So where can people find you if a business owner wanted to reach out and discuss, a legal matter that they had? Where can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm the only Jay Razzouk on the planet, as far as I know. So JayRazzouk. And you could also check me out at my website, proscalelegal.com. So proscalelegal.com.